guests, so we'll bring in some guests and see what we got for today. And then after when we get started, Chris, I'll have you do a quick introduction and we can dive into the reading.
Sure.
But Sherry, good to see you. Joy, Woody, welcome, gang.
Tanya, how are you feeling?
P7. Good group. Good group showing up.
Good morning, all.
Let's get this chat opened up. All right. My screen's ready. Ready to rock.
That's good. That's good because you're controlling it. So.
Yeah. What happened the other day when I got knocked off? I was in Iowa. There was a storm, and apparently the internet dropped for about 10 minutes. And
yeah, you froze, and then Linfield picked it up.
did the host just transfer?
I don't know what he did. It seems like it did because he didn't have to fiddle with it too much to make the switch.
Well, I was lucky. Good fortune there. It was a strange feeling too, because it was like I was in the middle of talking, and all of a sudden I was like, I think everybody else has frozen except me. and then a moment later, the whole thing just dropped, and I went, huh. Looks like maybe I'm the problem. And
yeah, the problem's always with someone else, right?
It was easy to cast blame on the aspersions on the rest of you. I'll say that.
Well, especially knowing who else was in the room. Yeah, it's easy.
and then it was obvious that no. Once again, I'm the problem. So sad. Speaking of problems, we're gonna be looking at some more problems with Job and some thoughts of his friends. Before I do that, maybe I can see if what do you guys see?
I see your screen. It's kind of small.
All right, so I'm gonna do a quick stop share and reshare because I just want to. It took me a while to get in the spirit. It took me a while to get in the spirit of the thing, but my new screensaver is our new puppy, who's just been born and will be receiving in October. But I've decided that Josh and Linfield shouldn't have all the fun, and that all their crying and whining about their dogs, I've decided to. They can't just be the only ones crying about stuff like that. So I, as well, am going to be crying about puppy life in short order. So.
Yes, you are. hey, Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Chris, give us a quick introduction, and then we'll dive into the text.
Sure. Chris Bjorlo. I think this group's had to put up with me a couple different times. Started with Song of Solomon, and then I joined into another group session, and it was kind of cool. I was at church this past Sunday, and got to meet Bob Poole. It's always fun when you get to meet the people that are on here that you never get to see. So It's kind of cool. You got to pull his mask down. I actually got to see a face, which was cool. So yeah, if anybody runs across a tall 6'8" bald guy at Journey North Baxter, introduce yourself if you're on here, because it's always fun to put a name to face.
Well, and I will say it's really fun in COVID because you get guys like Bob, and you're like, yeah, that mask really does help. It really, really, Bob, I think you stick with the mask even after COVID's done, just so you know.
Messed up. That's messed up.
Is he even on? I mean, I
don't know. That he might, if he was, he probably won't be anymore.
He's gone. Oh, yeah, there he is. Yeah. Did you see those wristbands that we have, Bob? The kind of the green, yellow, and red wristbands. I gave Kathy a red one just in case you're starting to get too close. So just so you know, that's where that came from. So, hey, all right, let's get started. September 10th, Bildad, the Shuthite, replied, "How long will you say such things? Your words are blistering wind. Does God prevent justice? Does the Almighty pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if you will seek God earnestly and plead with the Almighty, if you're pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to the prosperous state. Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will be your future. It's so fun to see the way with which this guy has the right heart, I think, out of the gate. I mean, I'm looking and going, this isn't, evil intent. This is someone who really looks at Job and says, you know what, Job, I see your suffering. I love you enough to tell you that if you would just turn from your wicked ways and give your life to God for real, and not just fool around with this thing. And Job's like, you know what, I'm in. I'm totally in. I love the Lord. I'm following him with all my heart. I'm doing everything I can that I know is right. And he's like, but I want you to prosper. Things will go well if you would just repent. And I don't know. So I mean, I kind of look at this and go, you know what, I want friends like Bildad in my life that can speak hard truths, but it's really weird when you have a supposition that's wrong. And we've seen that now with a couple of these guys that their supposition's wrong about what's causing the pain in Job's life, and how if you don't get it right, the advice often is askew, right? So anyway, he says, ask the former generation to find out what their ancestors learned. For we were born only yesterday. We know nothing. I mean, maybe the old elders amongst us can help us out and help us learn some things. And our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? Can a papyrus grow tall where there is no marsh? Can reeds thrive without water? While still growing and uncut, they wither more quickly than grass. Such is the destiny of all who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless. What they trust is fragile. What they are relying is a spider's web. They lean on the web, but it gives way. They cling to it, but it does not hold. They are like well-watered plant in sunshine, shedding its shoots over the garden. It entwines its roots around piles of rocks, and it looks for places among the stones. But when it is torn from its spot, that place disowns it and says, I never saw you. Surely its life withers away, and from the soil other plants grow. Surely God does not reject one who is blameless, or strengthen the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. Indeed, I know that this is true, but how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? Though they wished to dispute with him, they could not answer him one time out of 1,000. His wisdom is profound. His power is vast. His ways are higher than our ways. Is essentially what we're hearing. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? He moves mountains without their knowing it and overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and he makes pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of Baron and Orion and Pleiades and that place and
Pleiades
and constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him. He snatches away. Who can stop him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? God does not restrain his anger. Even the cohorts of Rahab cowered at his feet. My fear too. I lost my place.
You're good.
Okay.
How then can I dispute with him? How can I find words to argue with him? Though I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. Even if I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. He would crush me with a storm and multiply my wounds for no reason. He would not let me catch my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery. If it is a matter of strength, he is mighty. And if it is a matter of justice, who can challenge him? Even if I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. If I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges. If it is not he, then who is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy. They skim past like boats of papyrus, like eagles swooping down on their prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and smile. I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent. Since I am already found guilty, why should I struggle in vain? Even if I washed myself with soap and my hands with cleansing powder, you would plunge me into a slime pit so that even my clothes would detest me. He is not a mere mortal like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me, so that his terror would frighten me no more, then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot. I loathe my very life. Therefore, I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. I say to God, do not declare me guilty, but tell me what charges you have against me. Does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands, while you smile on the plans of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as a mortal sees? Are your days like those of a mortal, or your years like those of a strong man, that you must search out my faults and probe after my sin, though you know that I am guilty, and that no one can rescue me from your hand? Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese, clothe me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinews? You gave me life and showed me kindness. In your providence watched over my spirit.
But this is what you concealed in your heart, and I know that this is in your mind. By sin, you would be watching me and would not let my offense go unpunished. If I am guilty, woe to me. Even if I'm innocent, I cannot lift my head, for I am full of shame and drowned in my affliction. If I hold my head high, you stalk me like a lion. Again, display against me. You bring new witnesses against me and increase your anger towards me. Your force comes against me, wave upon wave. When then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before any eye saw me. If I only had never come into being, or had been carried straight from the womb to the grave. Are not my few days almost over? Turn away from me so I can have a moment's joy before I go to the place of no return and the land of gloom and utter darkness, to the land of the deepest night, of utter darkness and disorder, wherever the light is like darkness. Where even the light is like darkness. Thank you.
Wow. What'd you guys think?
I was looking in the chat just now, Mark, and I don't know if we want to jump to it right now, but at some point, maybe it comes up in the questions. Steve Wright and Dustin made a comment about if only there was someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there is such a mediator.
Yeah, well, interesting. In the frame here, you know, there's this sense in I know obviously we're thinking of Christ as the questions being raised, but in a real way, I mean, he's saying, you know, God has done me wrong in this story, and he's making his case. He's that there's problems with the way I'm being treated, and I don't like it, and I'm crying out, God, I want you to show up and show me what I've done, show me where I've been wrong, you know, show me where my sin is, you know, and there's a kind of a sense like, you know what, even if he did show up, then what? Now what do I do? I mean, you know, is there any way that this would turn out well? I mean, he would probably just throw me into some pit, some slime pit, right? I mean, there's no real good answer because I've not done anything, and he's just playing with me, and I hate it. And I want you to show me where I've done wrong. And if I could go before a judge, I think I'd be declared guilty because he's God. Right? So I mean, how do I even argue my case against God? Maybe there could be a mediator, but there can't be a mediator because there's no sense of equality, right? I mean, if you're going to go to court and have your court case mediated, you both have given up authority to this mediator who's going to speak into that. And there's not even a chance that I'd have my case fairly heard because God has authority, and so he's really in a bind, in this moment, because he's like, I feel like I'm putting words in his mouth, but I feel like I'm a pawn on a chessboard, and I have no hope of righting this situation. And man, I just think it's so powerful. So, what do you guys think? What did you see in there?
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh,
I love David. I don't know if you saw Dave's comment. You always get the hard passages.
Yeah, started with Song of Solomon. It was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. No, what I saw, I mean, again, you look at Bildad, and it sounds like he's at the beginning of this whole thing. It sounds like he's going to kind of go into a consultation, and then he kind of seems to go into this more almost accuser role of what Job possibly had done to deserve God's wrath, and then it kind of goes into how is God using this, and then it talks. I can't wait to get into question 5, the whole blameless and righteousness aspect of it. But it's interesting how when bad things happen to us, how we view them and how we tackle them in our lives. So I love Job. I've always loved Job. So always a fun part to be, this reading is fun to be a part of. So.
Well, it's funny you'd say that. I mentioned a couple days ago that it was Martin Luther's favorite book. It's been the favorite of many theologians. It's got some real incredible complexities. On Sunday, I'll unpack a few issues that are brought to bear that confounded science for many years, hundreds of thousands of years, and was first captured here, that have since in modern day been proved profoundly accurate. But what did Bildad imply, do you think, about Job? What was that? You're kind of alluding to some of it, Chris, but what do you guys think?
Oh, I just thought it was that he was basically alluding to him of almost like, what have you done to deserve, God's judgment and wrath here? It's kind of what it sounded like to me. And so, and like you said, Job is kind of like, hey, I'm down to do whatever I need to do. But that just kind of came across a little accusatory, I think, from Bildad.
For sure. And even, and maybe not you, maybe your kids are the problem. It's like, right. Have you taken into consideration, Job, that your kids are like, maybe what's bringing all this on, and as a dad, I kind of go, yeah, it was probably my kids.
Probably the kids' fault. Mark, can you scroll back up to toward the end of Bildad's dialogue with Job? Because one of the things I thought that I saw, that in spite of that, I thought that he ended by, with some encouragement. Go up just a little bit further. I thought that at the end of his presentation to him, he will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. I was hoping that what he was doing there was maybe offering some condolence and say, there's still a chance that you might.
Yeah, and see, as I read it, it felt to me like he's saying, if you just get yourself right with God and repent, God's got plans to bless you. Go get this right, Job.
Right.
Make this right, and you're gonna have wealth again. You'll have prosperity again. You'll have happiness again. All you need to do is straighten out your life, Job. And so it feels to me like go try harder, and then blessing's gonna come your way. That feels to me like his encouragement is in a sense, I mean, like I said, I mean, it feels like the encouragement would make sense had he done something wrong.
Right.
You know, but in light of the fact that there's no criminality, there's no solution, it feels really hopeless. It's like, you know, how do I make right what I had no part in causing or creating? And so there's a hopelessness that I think Job reflects that despairing in his response, like, yeah, I got nothing, and consequently, God, I'm kind of hacked off about it.
What don't we do that as Christians when we see someone going through struggles and suffering and everything? I think we tend to assume that it's something that they, you know, did on their own or that they deserve. And I feel like sometimes you just need to take a step back from that and just kind of get the whole picture. But I see it happen a lot where we see people suffering, whether it's in the church or outside of the church, and we automatically assume it's something that they've done in their lives to create this. And a lot of the times it's true, right? I mean, a lot of times it is true. But it just, I don't blame Bill Dad at all for probably coming up with, you know, that scenario, because that's exactly what we think is our human nature.
Yeah, and it's really good advice if there had been done, if something had happened. But it goes back to, you know, I think sometimes Chris, the importance of spending more time listening and less time talking, you know, and maybe he could have been a better friend if he just empathized and said, you know what, I don't get why this is happening to you. You know, if I think if can be a very powerful word in our assistance. If you've done something wrong, man, I think you should go make it right with God. But I want to walk with you through this hardship, because this is a difficult season, and I don't get why it's happening this way for you. But I'm in your corner. You know, I think that could have been a really powerful thing for a guy like Job, right?
Right.
Job, I don't understand why this is happening. If you screwed this thing up, go fix it. You know, God's going to be just, and he'll come back and give you favor and land and prosperity and wealth beyond imagination. He'll be that kind of a God for you, but you got to make it right if you made it wrong. But in the midst of this, I'm just going to be in your corner and support you the best I can, because this is really hard, and I don't want you to be alone. I mean, that could have been a really powerful statement. But his implication is there is something wrong, and go fix it. And I can understand why he thought that. You know, under what circumstances would you conclude that God was punishing someone to whom bad things are happening, like America? When would you make that assumption?
You know, maybe if you knew they had done something. You know, if you were aware of, you know, so somebody robs a bank, and you know they robbed a bank, and they're getting punished. You know, it's like, okay, now bad things are happening, and maybe they haven't been caught by the authorities yet, but they're driving and their tire goes flat, and then they're running and they trip and they lose all the money. It sounds like a movie script, doesn't it? And then they're running along and they drop all the money and they only pick up part of it, and then they keep, you know, one bad thing after another happens. You might say, you know what? I think you're being punished for what you did.
No. No.
Maybe when it doesn't always seem so obvious to other people, but you know something was done wrong.
I shared about two weeks ago my experience where I went down to the cities. We had a family thing that came up, and that was bad in itself. I mean, family stuff. Whenever you hear someone say we had family stuff, just know that doesn't usually mean something really wonderful happened, right? So we had some family stuff, and Elizabeth wound up spending the night down in the cities. I came back, and on the way back, got a flat tire. AAA took forever. I shared all that, and finally got home, and I'm locked out of my house, you know, crawling in the window like a thief, you know, and I'm just like. Yet I felt a little bit like Job. I was like, God, why is all this happening now? Not anything like Job, because I mean, that was so much not even all that bad. But in that moment, it felt like one thing after another. And you know, I could easily have concluded, man, there must be something bad that I've done in my life. I think sometimes when I look at the question, when do you conclude God's punishing someone? I tend to think maybe it was, me. My first assumption is, if, maybe I'm harder on myself than I'm on other people. But when things go bad, it's easy to wonder if God is bringing some kind of justice.
Yeah.
What can you learn from an older person that you cannot learn from anyone else? Really, this is a question for Todd.
I knew you.
Messed up.
I was going to say, I don't know any older people, so I can't really help. There's nobody older than me. You can't learn anything from me.
Yeah, this. I think we can all probably chip in for this one, because this has got, I think, some rich implications.
Well, I think, when I think about someone older than me, one of the things that comes to mind is certainly life experience. The chances of having gone down certain roads, experienced certain things. There is something comforting about being able to talk to someone who has, been there and done that, had the experience, came through it. Whether or not you learn from their, circumstances or not, that maybe is a different question. But I think there is a level of comfort knowing that someone has maybe gone down that path before you.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I had a really good relationship with a grandfather growing up, that I wish I would have leaned into him more for advice. I think that today's generation, just today in general, we tend to not frown upon the elderly, but just kind of most dismiss them. And we think that we're full of all these answers, and that, the times now are better and faster and stronger, and why lean into an older generation? I think there's a lot of answers to and wisdom to be tapped into with an older generation, and there's a lot of regret that I have in not leaning into my grandfather a little bit more for some of his wisdom. As he's dying from heart disease, I'm seeing him all of a sudden out of nowhere. He's got a Bible in his hand, and he's getting in the Word, and I remember these things, but I never really remember leaning into them, because I remember I knew everything at 17, 18, 19 years old, so I didn't really have to ask him anything. But I think that's kind of the culture we're in right now. We kind of dismiss some of the wisdom that we can get from that generation, and we tend to think we've got all the answers, unfortunately.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about what you said too, as you said it, my mind went to how quick we can go and get answers now in ways we never could before, without actually getting at all relational with anybody. I mean, how many questions do you think get asked to Alexis a day, or Alexa, or the Google, you just, Google knows things, right? So it's like, don't ask that other person a question, and so we have just access to data. But like I mentioned, I read back in July and the first part of August, most of the Federalist papers, and was really just humbled at the strength of the writing and the unbelievable intelligence of some of our founding fathers, and the way with which they thought and could defend their thinking, and the use of language, and how I felt like a kindergartner reading a college thesis. It was some of it was really labor intensive to kind of come to clarity about what they were saying, because of the way that they said it's just brilliant, just really, really brilliant. And it kind of betrayed my level of ignorance, and that was a humbling thing, because I think we tend to look back on time without recognizing the wisdom and intelligence of some of the great philosophers, some of the great theologians, some of the great thinkers of years gone by. Well, one thing I would add to this that I think has really been probably, if I look back over the course of my life and say I had a strength, it's that I've always sought mentors. And I don't know that we know how to get mentorship in our life, or we don't know how to ask for mentorship, or we don't know how to be mentored. And I think finding people that you can lean into is such a key to having a quality of marriage, a quality of business. My favorite story in relationship to that is that, I was a new pastor at Grace Fellowship in Brooklyn Park, and pretty quickly realized that I was in managing large teams of people kind of out of my depth. And I had seen a older gentleman who I knew had been kind of a captain of industry, had been a vice president of a large semiconductor company down the city, he's retired and maybe had some time on his hands. And I asked if he'd go out to lunch with me, and so we did. And he taught me different strategies for thinking about how to manage people and how to organize my thoughts and then communicate them in effective fashions. And we got together every 2 weeks at a little place called Enjoy China. And it was really great because he was also wealthy enough that he almost always bought lunch. And so there was multiple advantages to the conversation, my learning, my growing, my being able to bring questions to him and having lunch with him was just fantastic. One day after about a year of that, I decided to invite him over to my house and have my family meet him and have him for dinner. And we were sitting in my home in Champlin, and after dinner, Rebecca went and sat up on his lap, and I'm looking across the table and I'm thinking, dang, I wish he wasn't my mentor. I wish he was my dad. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my mom is available. So the next day I called my mom and I said, Mom, I got a need for a small group in your area. Would you be willing to host a small group? And she said, sure. And then I called this man, Wayne. I said, I have a host home in Plymouth. I know it's a bit of a drive, but I need a really gifted leader. Would you be willing to lead it? And he said, sure. And after that, I was like, okay, that's as much meddling as I'm going to do. It's as close as I'm going to get to playing the role of matchmaker. But 2.5 years later, he came and knocked on my door and he said, Mark, I've fallen in love with your mom and I want to ask permission to marry her. I want your blessing to marry her. And wow, a few months later, I was officiating a wedding between my mentor and my mother. And what a gift from God that relationship has been. And now I really do think of him as father. And so to have moved from mentorship to having a fatherly voice speaking in my life has been one of the beautiful gifts that God has given me. So what kind of people forget God and why do they forget him?
This is an interesting one.
It is. One thing that comes to mind, people who seem to experience success in worldly fashion. Maybe there's a temptation to think that they're doing it on their own. I've created this, whatever it is, by my own means. And I wonder sometimes if people who are successful, and then the harder they work, maybe they see more success, and so they begin to think that it's on them. And so they kind of forget that maybe all those blessings were really because of God.
I like how in the chat, Jenny said, self-sufficient people. I think that's one of the real dangers of the culture we live in is it's easy to feel self-sufficient. It's easy to feel like, you know what, I've earned this. I've pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I don't need, I can satisfy the needs that I have in my life. I don't need other people and I don't need God. And I think that puts us positionally in a dangerous place when we have the kind of systems that we've created and the wealth that we have created. I think it does place us in a dangerous place.
What were you going to say, Chris?
Oh, no, it kind of goes with the whole self-sufficient thing too. I've just seen it in my own life too. And it's, not so much, Todd, you talked about us taking sometimes credit for it. I don't find myself taking credit for what's in my life, but I find myself becoming self-sufficient and almost forgetful sometimes of how blessed I am and we all are to live in the kind of, the wealth that we have in this country versus the rest of the world. And so I just find myself, it's, we talk about that slow fade or that slow drift, and it can happen. And you've got to kind of recenter yourself because it's so easy to wake up in the morning, be self-sufficient, sure, hop on here and do a little Bible study and then go on your merry way and get caught up in stuff. And so I've really had to recenter myself. And it's interesting how God will send you some gentle and not so gentle reminders of your dependence on him. And so it's been interesting. It's been good, but interesting. So
Do you think it's when we get too comfortable, Chris?
I think it's when we get too comfortable. But I also think that we're conscious of it too. I think that, we know when we're drifting, we maybe not in those small little increments, but if you look at a large increment of time, you can see and sense the slow drift, but almost be indifferent to it because you're comfortable, right? And I think that's the time that God kind of intercedes in your life with whatever it may be. In this particular case, it's Job's pain and suffering and anguish, and in our lives it can be anything. It can be problems with kids, problems with marriage, problems at work. And I think that God just uses those things to bring us to our knees again, and to have him have us realize our dependence on him and how we truly need him, but how easy it is to drift as well.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder sometimes too, when we look back on our lives, a lot of times hardship and pain is stuff that we'll say things like, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. And yet I really appreciate how God has used that time or season or experience in my life. And sometimes what I wonder about is, and that's been true for me big time, because I'm an experiential learner. It's like, if there's a hot pan, I pretty much want to touch it just to make sure, and so, a lot of the burns I've got are self-inflicted wounds. It's like, I had to go touch that pot. I don't know what it was. It's like, don't touch it. Wasn't warning enough, right? And at the same time that I know that's my experience, I wonder sometimes just by how much I have avoided pain by choosing to try and have a gratitude and a thankfulness and a humility. Those moments where I've actually exhibited that without being brought low because of stupid stuff or sin or hard-heartedness or unkindness in my life. I wonder if God has spared me a lot, and I don't even recognize how I've been spared. I think sometimes that we might do more right things than we are aware of that have spared us unbelievable amounts of hardship. In what way is it possible? Here's your big question, Chris. What way is it possible for the righteous what way is it possible to be righteous or blameless before God?
Okay, so I dug into this yesterday when I got the questions, because I kind of was trying to think about the questions. So went into blameless, right? And into righteousness or righteous before God. So it kind of led me down to a psalm path, right? So it talks about blamelessness a lot in the Psalms. I got listed 18, 19, and 119. It talked about being blessed and kept from guilt and innocent of transgression. So I'm like, are we that, right? And then righteous was Psalm 37, 55, and 146, where upholds and never be moved, and he loves us, right? But we're taught that we're sinners and that we're forgiven, but we are sinners. And so when I see that, is it possible for us to be blameless? Well, no, I'm not blameless before God. I'm full of blame and full of sin that thank God Jesus, has died for, and the whole righteous aspect of it too. And then I was reading this article, and it's like, if you're a Christian, you should answer yes to this question. And so I kind of wanted to pose it to you guys, and I know we're running short on time, but what exactly does it mean to be righteous and blameless, and can we say yes to that as a Christian?
Todd, you want to take a swing at the ball? He teed it up for you.
So, well, the swing that I would take is just to say, Chris, the half of the equation is yes, we are not blameless, we are blameful, if there is such a thing. But because of Jesus interceding on the other side, yes, we are blameless because he chose to take on all that blame. So I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but the way I look at it is it's a yes and.
So I would look at it similarly in as much as I'm a debtor, but my debt's been paid in full. So am I in debt? No. I'm debt free. I'm debt free because my debt's been paid. I was unable to pay the debt, and I got into the debt. Am I a debtor? I am a righteous and made clean Son of the Most High God.
So could a guy like Job say that he was blameless and righteous before God, right?
Yeah. And so in this case, it's really, I mean, it's really amounts to, was he living rightly and justly? And was he living in a way that that allowed his acknowledgement of a holy God to be true in his life? And I think that's what he would be saying. And I think what God was even saying to Satan is that here's a guy who, to the degree he's able, is living rightly and is living worshipfully. And so God's the one who declares him righteous at the chapter 1. He said, this is a righteous man who is doing right on the earth. And Satan's like, yeah, well, or Satan, as the Hebrew would say, but he's a person who's only doing right because you're blessing him. And God's saying, well, let's let you test that. To the end, we'll find, and I'll close with this final thought, that that issue of, feeling like a pawn on a chessboard. I love that is actually what is happening in this book. But we'll discover that it wasn't Job that was being the pawn. It was Satan. So, Father God, I just thank you so much that you love us and that you've declared us righteous, not because of our righteousness, but because of the righteousness of your Son, Yeshua. And I ask, Father, that we would experience a sense of the freedom of having our debts paid and walk in the freedom of that with a weight lifted from our lives, knowing that because of what you've given and what you've done, we can be free and forgiven. So let us walk as women and men who are indeed free. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 All right, gang. Live free well. So,
Have a good day.
Have a great day, gang.
See you, gang.
See you guys.